They taught you about Egypt. They showed you the pyramids, symbols of a civilization so ancient, so magnificent, that we still cannot fully explain how they were built. Egypt became the story of Africa. Egypt became the shorthand for everything worth knowing about the continent. But here is what they did not tell you. There is another civilization, one that built more pyramids than Egypt, one that traded directly with Rome, Persia, India, and China, all at the same time. A civilization that conquered Arabia, that controlled both sides of the Red Sea simultaneously, that raised obelisks so enormous that when Italy stole one and engineers finally returned it, they needed a Boeing 747 to carry the pieces home. And somewhere inside a small stone church in northern Ethiopia, that same civilization may be guarding the most sacred object in all of human history, and object 3 of the world's great religions have been searching for since the moment it disappeared. This is the story of how the Aksumite Empire rose to power and became, for nearly 1,000 years, one of the most important civilizations on Earth. By the time this is over, you are going to feel something completely justified. You are going to feel robbed. To understand how Aksum was born, you need to stand somewhere specific. Stand on the Horn of Africa, that pointed wedge of land jutting into the sea on the continent's eastern edge, and look around. What you are standing on is not just geography, it is an intersection, the place where Africa reaches closest to the Arabian Peninsula, where the Red Sea narrows to a passage barely 30 kilometers wide. Every ship moving between the Mediterranean and the Indian Ocean had to pass through here. Every merchant carrying spice from India to Alexandria. Every trader pushing frankincense north toward Rome. This was a choke point, and the people who controlled it controlled the lifeblood of ancient commerce. Before Aksum arrived to claim it, others had already sensed what this land was worth. The first great kingdom here was called Dimt, flourishing around the 10th to 5th century BC in what is today northern Ethiopia and Eritrea. It built monumental temples. It used iron tools when much of the world still relied on bronze. It was a functioning, sophisticated society, and it was already in conversation with a civilization just across the narrow sea. From Arabia came the Sabeans. You know them, even if the name is unfamiliar. The Queen of Sheba, the legendary ruler who crossed the known world to test King Solomon's wisdom, she was Sabean. Her kingdom sat in what is today Yemen, rich from the trade in incense and myrrh. The Sabeans crossed the Red Sea and came west, bringing their language, their script, their gods, and their agricultural techniques. For centuries, the highland plateau of what would become Ethiopia was a mixing bowl. African bloodlines and Semitic languages, local beliefs absorbing foreign influence, kingdoms rising and falling, none powerful enough to unite the whole region. And then, around the 1st century AD, in a city 2,000 meters above the sea, something changed. Something woke up. The city was called Aksum, and around 100 AD, it began its ascent. The legends speak of a king named Aksumawi, a semi-divine ancestor who gave the city its name, descent from King Solomon himself through the Queen of Sheba's bloodline, a lineage so sacred that Ethiopian emperors would still be claiming it 2,000 years later.
The archaeology tells a more practical story. A community of farmers and traders sitting at the junction of highland routes and lowland paths, accumulating wealth and military authority, until the surrounding communities had no choice but to acknowledge them. What accelerated that accumulation was water. Not the absence of it, the abundance. The Aksumite highlands received reliable seasonal rain in a region where rain was never guaranteed. Surplus crops meant surplus population. Surplus population meant surplus soldiers. Surplus soldiers meant expansion. And then there was the port. 170 kilometers northeast, where the highlands drop toward the coast, sat a harbor town called Adulis. If Aksum was the brain of what was becoming an empire, Adulis was its heartbeat. Ships from Roman Egypt sailed in, carrying wine, olive oil, and glassware. They left carrying ivory, gold, emeralds, and live animals, rhinoceros, hippopotamus, destined for Roman arenas. The Greek merchant guide called The Periplus of the Erythraean Sea, written in the 1st century AD, describes Adulis already under the authority of the king of the Aksumites. Even then, at the very dawn of the written record, Aksum was already the power here. What early Aksumite kings understood, with an instinct history would prove absolutely correct, was that controlling the port meant controlling the money. They organized caravans into the African interior. They negotiated directly with Roman merchants. They built commercial networks stretching south toward Kenya, west toward the Nile, and across the sea toward Arabia and India. By the 3rd century, the Roman writer Mani ranked Aksum alongside Rome, Persia, and China as one of the 4 great empires of his time. In an age when Rome still ruled the Western imagination, Aksum was considered its equal. It had only just begun. The 4th century had a king. His name was Ezana, and certain people arrive in the world at exactly the right moment to change it forever. Ezana was a warrior first. Aksumite inscriptions, carved in stone in 3 languages, describe campaigns in every direction. He crushed rebellions in the highlands. He destroyed the ancient kingdom of Meroe in Nubia, the Kush civilization that had dominated the Nile Valley for centuries and carried its treasures back to Aksum. These inscriptions describe him in the language of total conquest. He did not merely defeat his enemies, he erased them. But it is not the wars that made Ezana immortal. It was a single, irreversible decision made around 330 AD under the influence of a man named Frumentius, a Syrian boy captured by Aksumite sailors, raised at the royal court, and who eventually became the king's most trusted advisor. Ezana converted to Christianity. He became the first monarch in African history, one of the earliest in all of world history to make Christianity the official religion of his state. He did this just years after Constantine made the same declaration for Rome, which means that in the 330s AD, 2 of the most powerful rulers on earth were simultaneously rewriting the spiritual identity of their civilizations. The evidence is carved in stone. His early inscriptions invoke the old Aksumite gods Mahrem, Beher, Meter. His later inscriptions invoke the Lord of Heaven, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. The shift is stark. A man raised in one world chose to enter another, and he brought his entire empire with him. But Aksum's greatness was also something you could hold in your hand. Aksum minted coins, gold, silver, bronze. In the ancient world, the ability to mint your own currency was a declaration of sovereignty so powerful that only the greatest civilizations dared attempt it. 4 civilizations did: Rome, Persia, China, and Aksum. Aksumite coins traveled to India, to Arabia, to Rome, stamped in 3 languages: Greek, Ge'ez, and South Arabian, a declaration that this kingdom did not speak to one world, it spoke to all of them. And then there were the obelisks, single pieces of granite, quarried, carved, transported, and somehow raised upright through means that still provoke genuine debate among modern engineers. The largest ever erected stood 33 meters tall and weighed 520 metric tons. It fell in antiquity. The pieces still lie on the ground in Aksum today, too shattered to raise again. Anyone who approached the city would have seen these towers from kilometers away and understood immediately they were approaching something unlike anything else on Earth. In the 6th century, King Kaleb, a devout Christian who would eventually abdicate his throne to live as a monk, crossed the Red Sea and invaded Yemen, defeating a king who had been massacring Christian communities there. For decades, Aksum controlled both shorelines of the Red Sea simultaneously, an African empire sitting astride the most important trade route in the ancient world. It was the high point, 5 centuries of building reaching its summit. And somewhere in that empire, in a church no outsider had ever entered, sat an object the world has never stopped arguing about.
There is a church in Aksum, Ethiopia. It is not grand by modern standards. Stone walls, a modest compound surrounded by a low fence, priests in white robes moving quietly through the grounds, incense in the air. The church is called the Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion, and the Ethiopians who guard it believe with absolute, unshakable certainty that it contains the Ark of the Covenant. The original, the real one, the wooden chest overlaid with gold, fitted with carrying poles, topped with 2 golden cherubim with wings spread, the object the book of Exodus describes as the dwelling place of God Himself, the container of the 10 Commandments, the object that brought down the walls of Jericho, the object that killed a man named Uzzah on the spot when he reached out to steady it, the most sacred artifact in the Hebrew tradition, venerated also in Christianity and Islam, missing from human history for 2,500 years. The Ethiopians say it is here, and they will not show it to you. Nobody has seen it. Not archaeologists, not visiting presidents, not the Pope, not any journalist who has ever tried. There is a single guardian, a monk appointed for life, chosen by his predecessor in a chain stretching back through history. And once this man accepts the role, he never leaves the compound again, not for anything. He spends his remaining years within those walls, guarding what he believes is the most important object in existence. You cannot interview him. You cannot examine what he guards. You can only stand outside the fence and understand that belief here is not a preference. It is the organizing fact of an entire civilization. Where does the claim come from? The Kebra Nagast, the Glories of Kings, Ethiopia's national epic, tells the story precisely. The Queen of Sheba, named Makeda in the text, traveled to Jerusalem and became pregnant with Solomon's son.
She returned to Ethiopia, gave birth to Menelik, and when Menelik came of age, he traveled to Jerusalem to meet his father. When he returned home, he brought the ark with him, either with Solomon's blessing or without it. The sources disagree. For centuries, outsiders dismissed this as a founding mythology, a beautiful story, an anchor for national identity. Then, historians began to look more carefully. The Ark of the Covenant disappears from the historical record around the 7th century BC, before the Babylonian destruction of Solomon's temple in 586 BC. Because when the Babylonians ransacked the temple, their own records of what they took do not mention the Ark. It was already gone. Nobody outside Ethiopia has ever claimed to know where. The connections between ancient Israel and ancient Ethiopia are real and documented through the Sabean traders, through shared worship traditions predating Christianity in the Ethiopian highlands, through the Beta Israel, one of the ancient Jewish communities in the world, who lived in Ethiopia for millennia. Ethiopia was not sealed off from the ancient Near East, it was woven into it. In 2009, the Patriarch of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church publicly stated the Ark was prepared to reveal it to the world. Within days, the statement was walked back. The Ark remained, as it has always been, behind those walls. Is it there? Nobody outside that compound knows. What we know is that the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, 2,000 years old, with no incentive to fabricate, has never changed its answer. The Ark of the Covenant is in Aksum. Whether you believe them is between you and what you think is possible. But this was not merely a religious claim. It was the foundation of Aksumite identity. It was the reason kings traced their blood to Solomon, the thread connecting a highland empire in northeast Africa to the oldest stories in human civilization. And it may still be there, in that quiet church, tended by a man who will never leave.
Empires do not fall the way we imagine. We picture armies at the gates, capitals in flames. The reality is almost always slower and in many ways more heartbreaking because the people living through it cannot see it clearly while it is happening. Aksum's decline began in the 7th century, not with a military defeat, with a change in the world around it. In 622 AD, a merchant in Mecca received a revelation that would reshape the planet. Islam spread with a speed no one who witnessed its first decade could have predicted. Within a generation, Muslim forces controlled Arabia, Persia, and Egypt. The Red Sea, the artery of Aksumite wealth, became an Arab-controlled waterway. Trade routes that had flowed through Adulis for centuries began to shift. Arab merchants operating out of newly Islamized ports took the commerce Aksum had once owned. Ships came to Adulis less often, the harbor silted up, the warehouses emptied. But Islam alone did not break Aksum. The empire was already wounded. The Aksumite highlands had been intensively farmed for centuries. The forests were gone, cleared for agriculture and fuel. The topsoil those forests had anchored was washing away each rainy season, the land producing less, the population it could sustain shrinking. Aksum had been stripping away the ecological foundation of its own power, one cleared hillside at a time, and nobody noticed until it was too late. And then there was the woman. Her name was Yodit, also called Judith, also called Gudit, also called Esato, meaning in the old language,
the fire. Sometime in the 9th or 10th century, a woman of non-Christian origin rose to military command in the regions surrounding Aksum. She was not a regent or a consort, she was a commander. And according to the Ethiopian tradition, she launched a campaign of devastating violence against the Christian Aksumite state, burning churches, destroying monasteries, hunting down the last members of the Solomonic royal line. The last Aksumite king fled south into the highlands with his infant son, hiding the child from her forces. She ruled for 40 years. She did not build an empire in the place of the one she destroyed. She simply destroyed. How much is history and how much is legend? Historians disagree. What is not disputed is that something happened in the 9th and 10th centuries that ended the Aksumite state. The city lost its primacy. Power moved south. A civilization that had endured for nearly 1,000 years quietly stopped being a civilization and became a memory. The world moved on, mostly forgetting that Aksum had ever existed.
Forgetting is not the same as erasing. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church, rooted in Ezana's conversion in the 4th century, survived the fall of the empire completely intact. It preserved the Gez language, the ancient tongue of Aksum, now used only in liturgy, the way Latin lives in the Catholic Mass. It preserved the traditions, the theology, the sacred identity that had defined the empire at its peak. The Solomonic dynasty survived too, fragmented, driven south, hidden. In 1270 AD, a king named Yekuno Amlak restored Solomonic rule to Ethiopia, claiming the ancient lineage. That dynasty ruled, with interruptions, all the way to 1974. Its last emperor, who claimed direct descent from Solomon and Sheba, who was crowned King of Kings, Lion of Judah, elect of God, was named Haile Selassie. The line from Aksum to Haile Selassie is, by the account of the Ethiopian state and the Orthodox Church, a literal dynastic continuity spanning more than 2,000 years. No other monarchy in history makes a comparable claim. And then there is the Obelisk. In 1937, Italian forces under Mussolini occupied Ethiopia and dismantled one of Aksum's great stelae, 24 meters of carved granite, 160 tons of stone, and shipped to Rome. A calculated act of humiliation. A civilization's monument turned into a colonial trophy. It stood in Rome for 65 years. In 2008, it came home, in 3 pieces, carried in the belly of a specially modified Boeing 747, reassembled in Aksum with Italian funding and Ethiopian ceremony. When the pieces landed, Ethiopians lined the roads for kilometers. Some wept, some danced, some knelt and prayed. Because the obelisk was not just stone, it was proof. Proof that they existed, that they mattered, that their story was not a footnote to someone else's history. It was one of the greatest stories the ancient world produced. They built more pyramids than Egypt. They traded with Rome and China at the same time. They minted coins when almost no one else could. They converted to Christianity before most of Europe knew what Christianity was. And they may be guarding the most sacred object in human history right now, today, in a modest compound in northern Ethiopia, watched over by a single monk who will never leave. Nobody taught you about them. Until now.
I want to sit with this for a moment. Because something happens when you learn about Aksum for the first time. Something beyond the facts. It has to do with the shape of the world we were given, the stories we were handed, the civilizations we were taught to see as important, and the ones quietly left off the map. Aksum was not marginal. It was acknowledged by Rome, respected by Persia, commercially connected to India and China. It made a religious choice that echoes 1,500 years into the present day, and yet, for most of us, it simply did not exist. Not in the textbooks, not in the documentaries, not in the conversation about the ancient world. That is not an accident. And correcting it is not just academic, it is a form of justice. If this story moved you, share it. Not for the algorithm, because the person next to you probably never heard of Aksum either, and they deserve to know. In our next video, we go further back and deeper. The Kingdom of Kush, the African civilization that ruled Egypt for a century, that gave the world a queen named Amanirenas, who fought the Roman Empire to a standstill and negotiated a peace Rome was not sure it had won. That story is coming. I will see you there.